welcome to the first conversation in a series of conversations for leadership for society, race and power. Before I get started, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. First, we encourage you to share the webinar with your networks via social media. The topics in the series will be quite dynamic, so expect things to shift around. Sessions may change and be rescheduled, but we are committed to providing a really exciting slate of conversations during the series. We'll provide readings to help you get up to speed on the topics covered in the session, and those are chosen to help you take away more from the conversations. If you're enrolled in this course for credit, please check out the leadership opportunities on Canvas and sign up by tomorrow at noon. If you sign up, I really look forward to working with you on identifying speakers, preparing interview plans, and sharing important ideas with the general public. So you all know this series is really designed to educate and spark broader conversations about the role of race in society. And I'm really excited to have our two first guests. First, we have Quita Highsmith from Genentech, the Chief Diversity Officer at Genentech. And we also have Simone Hill, Equity and Belonging and People Operations at Omidyar Network. So thank you both for joining us. Really excited to have this conversation with you too. So why don't you just first, Quita, why don't you start us off and just give us a quick description of your role and some information about Genentech.
All right, well, thank you, Brian and Stanford, for inviting me. Hello, everyone. I'm Quita Highsmith, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for Genentech. Genentech is considered the founder of the biotech industry, 43 years ago, founded in South San Francisco. And we have 13,000 employees, and we seek to discover medicines that treat very serious and life-threatening medical conditions such as cancer, multiple sclerosis, lupus, ophthalmology, neuroscience. Me personally, I've always been on the commercial side of the business, whether it's leading a sales force, marketing, franchises, or in government affairs, because it helps you understand the importance of the financial arm of the organization. And to be honest, I never thought I would be in diversity and inclusion. My experience in diversity and inclusion is being a Black woman. However, there was this opportunity that arose when I interviewed with the Chief Executive Officer about the role to really make a greater difference in the organization and to help us think bigger and bolder about diversity and inclusion and to bring us all along the journey. So who knew 2020 would turn out this way, where we would be discussing race so much at the office. And it's an amazing opportunity to be a part of it.
Great, thanks for being here. Well, I will say, you never thought that you'd be in this role, but if being a Black woman is your primary experience, you have a lot of it. So
a whole lifetime.
Exactly. Okay, Simone, what about you?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Simone Hill. I work at Omidyar Network. We are a social change venture, really primarily focused on funding, trying to create and reimagine systems and the ideas that govern them to create a much more equitable and inclusive society for all. I've been there for about 2 years now. I manage all of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts, both as it relates to our internal work, our grant making, and I also manage our new work around pluralism and our new grant making portfolio on racial justice. So we're pretty small. We're about 55 people worldwide, but we primarily provide funding both in the US, but also in other countries. So I'm really excited, similar to Quita, to talk about this. I just said to her before we started, I'm like, I talk about race now all day, every day. It's both invigorating and exhausting, but I'm happy to be able to chat with y'all today.
Great. Well, we'll try to keep it on the invigorating side. So can you both, and I guess I'll start with you, Simone, give me a sense of the size of your organization and the diversity of the workforce. And separate, I'd like to hear about the diversity of your leadership.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, so like I said, we're about 55 employees. We have been focused over the past really 2 years on trying to continuously improve the diversity of our workforce. I think we've done a good job, not great job, so far on those avenues. I think in terms of diversity of workforce, we're actually a majority female organization. Our underrepresented minorities, including Black African American and Hispanic or Latinx folks, make up around 10% or so of our workforce. But we do want to increase that, especially around our leadership. So right now, our leadership team is actually quite diverse. It's a predominantly female leadership team. That includes people of color, including myself. And that is something that we specifically focused on in our efforts last year, really trying to improve the diversity of both experience, demographics, but also thought on our leadership team.
I'm going to come back to that, how you define diversity in a second, but let me turn to Quita. Quita, what about you? What's the diversity of your workforce and leadership look like?
So our workforce is quite diverse. We're based here in the Bay Area, so we have a high population of Asian talent. And so our overall workforce is about 50-50, people of color and people that are white. So our overall workforce is quite diverse. Where we have opportunities is to really think about our leadership, and specifically around Latinx and African American talent. We've been, in the last couple of years, been much more transparent about what our needs are. We've actually started to release our numbers to the whole entire organization so people can actually see for themselves what our challenges are so that we can begin to make a difference. Some of the things that the company has done over time, we set a goal around more women in leadership, and we were able to actually achieve in our most senior ranks, director and officer ranks, where we have more than 50% of that leadership is female. And now our opportunity is to go back and really think about how we take those lessons that we learned in increasing our female leadership talent for our Black and Hispanic employees.
All right, great. So what I wanted to get to is, what exactly are you all talking about when you talk about diversity? So you both use the term, we are very diverse. I have no idea what that means, really. Actually, I know what people are talking about, but I'm not sure that everyone thinks the same thing when they hear those words, diversity. And also just expanding that a bit, equity and inclusion, right? What are we talking about? We can add belonging to. So I'd like to hear from you, when you use those words, what are we really talking about?
For us at Genentech, we recently defined that, because I do think, to your point, Brian, that we are using those words kind of loosely. So what does it mean? So that we're all on the same page, so that when we say diversity, inclusion, equality, and equity, that the organization knows what we're talking about. And so recently, a few months ago, we went through some exercises so that we could define. And for us, diversity is the visible and invisible differences that exist among all people. For us, inclusion is about a culture where everyone is respected. And when I talk to people of color, respect is very important and belongs and can thrive. So we use those three words, respect, belong, and thrive, for inclusion. And then for us, equity means, how do we have fair access for people, and considering their unique barriers or privileges that come with people who are, of a certain race.
Yeah, and it's a very similar way that we define it. So for us, diversity is all the ways in which individuals and groups of individuals differ from one another. That is both the demographic, the physical, kind of the standard diversity that you think of when you look at a job application in kind of the equal employment opportunity section. So that could be race, that could be gender, that could be ability status, that could be also things like gender identity expression, sexual orientation. We also think about diversity in terms of cognitive diversity. I think this is where a lot of nuance comes in with companies. Like for us, one of the things that we are trying very hard to continue to diversify is the types of industries or schools that people come from when they come to us, right? Like we don't want to be a place in which you have to have come from an Ivy Plus school, right, to work for us. So we do define it broadly, but we do also have specific metrics that we're tracking as well, so that it doesn't feel like it just means everything, therefore it means nothing. On the equity side, I think Quita nailed it right on the head. I think the big thing and difference, right, that I make sure that everybody knows in terms of the difference between equity and equality. Equity acknowledges and understands that people come from different backgrounds, different levels of privilege, have had different opportunities to succeed, and therefore will need different levels of resources to continue to or to be successful. Equality, on the other hand, gives everybody the same thing, kind of regardless of where they started. And on the inclusion and belonging side, I kind of see that as like a step function, if you will. So for inclusion, I love the kind of analogy of like inclusion is you have a seat at the table, right? You have been invited to the table. Where belonging comes in is then your voice, your experiences, all of the things about you and your authentic self is valued and amplified at that table, right? You're not just a butt in the seat. You're not just a face. You're not just there for numbers. Your opinion is actually valued. And so that for me is a big difference between those efforts. And we try to strive for belonging at ON.
All right, I have an issue with belonging. I'm going to come to that in a second.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's talk about it.
I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. But let me go back for a second and push on this diversity thing first. So I'm left-handed. Are you taking care of me? You taking care of my left-handed people? Like, I just don't understand this diversity thing. It seems really broad. Like, how do you identify what characteristics of diversity matter? Like, everybody is unique. So tell me, how do you decide which dimensions of diversity you pay attention to?
Well, I can start. You know what? Let's be clear. Diversity and inclusion is multifaceted. It's complex, and there are a host of issues. So there's no magic bullet for us. But what we do know is that there are some systemic issues that have prevented Black and Hispanic people from reaching their seat at the table, as Simone said. And what we're really talking about right now at Genentech is, how do we really think transparently and be honest about the people who have been impacted by not having that seat at the table? And the people who have been impacted by not having that seat at the table have been Black and Latinx folks. And so for us, we want to think specifically about what are the things that we're doing. And it's not just about representation, right? And so for us, we also have foster belonging as one of our key pillars, but we also have advancing inclusive research and health equity, because what COVID has shown us is that Black and Hispanic people are being disproportionately impacted by COVID. And why is that? Right? Why is that? Because they're the frontline workers. They may not live in the places where there is great access to healthcare. They may not themselves have good healthcare. And so when we think about the work that we're doing, it's not just about representation of people in a seat, but it's also about the foundational work that we do, as well as how we spend our resources. We're right now doing a pilot with some vendors to ask them some questions around diversity and inclusion. What awards have you won? How diverse are the people that are going to be on the Genentech business from your company in our company? How diverse are they going to be as far as people of color, including Black and Latinx? Because if we just focus on representation, that's only part of the battle. We also must think about the financial responsibilities we have to society.
Absolutely. And similar for us, like I said, we do define diversity in a pretty broad way, but in terms of like our metrics and what we are focusing on, especially post or in the middle of COVID, what we've seen from COVID, what we're seeing in terms of the calls for racial justice, we are very focused on both increasing representation and also making sure that we have, we're creating a culture in which the people that we're bringing in that are coming from diverse backgrounds actually do feel like they belong here. So I'm sure you're gonna pick on me for that, Brian. But it is, right? Because if you are only focusing on the front end of the problem, if you're only focusing on the funnel, you're only focusing on getting kind of, again, butts and seats, you're gonna have a revolving door of talent going right back out if they don't feel like their voice is valued, that their opinions matter, that they're being invited to the meetings, that they're the proposals that they're submitting, the grantees and things like that they are submitting aren't being heard, right? And so to your question about what it means, right? I think for us, we assessed our own workforce and tried to figure out what voices are we missing, right? And so again, that's not just on the physical side. Yes, we are very, very actively trying to recruit for Black and Latinx talent. But again, like I said, a big part of also what we're trying to do is realizing that we need more people who have been on the ground, who have grassroots infrastructure background. That's also diverse for who we are, right? So it's a mix of both. No, it's not left-handed folks, not necessarily. But to Quita's point, it's assessing what are the problems that we're trying to solve, and to be able to solve those problems, who do we need in the room, right? Yeah. And right now it is absolutely kind of URM talent for that.
And I asked to push on the diversity because I think people are uncomfortable sometimes talking about power differentials.
Yes.
Yes.
Systemic issues, right? So
Yes.
we talk about diversity. It's easy to talk about any dimension, left-handed people,
Right.
difference of thought, and those things can be valuable, but I see a lot of discomfort just naming power differentials around certain identities, and that matters. So
Absolutely.
I see where you all were on that. But now I am going to get back to the belonging.
Uh-oh.
Here's the thing, like I'm a professor at Stanford, and I show up, and I believe I show up in a way that people, once they sit in the classroom with me, recognize it as the way a professor at Stanford might show up. But that's very different than the way I would show up at home, right? It's not necessarily the way I talk when I talk to my mom and my sister, and it's not just the word choice, but it's just the way I present is different, right? And as a Black man, there's code switching involved in being in these corporate settings, right? So when people talk about belonging, they talk as if I can just show up and be the way I am at home. I don't believe you. I just don't believe that's true. Simone, I don't believe that's true at Omidyar. And Quita, I don't believe that's true at Genentech. And the question is that the goal? Are you telling me that that's what I should, if I got a job at Omidyar or a job at Genentech, I can show up the way I am at home and it's going to be okay? People are going to be like, yeah, he's smart. He has a lot to add to this organization.
You know, I would say yes. I show up, like I literally was interviewing my head of marketing for a role, and I have not met. This is through the Zoom calls, and she literally said to me after she got the job, she was like, I wanted to come and work for Genentech because I felt like you sounded just like you did at home. And when we think about the code switching, for many years, I wore my hair in a relaxer, right? Because that was what I thought was the code to fit in to white America.
Quita, by the way, does everybody know what a relaxer is?
Oh, a relaxer is when women of color have to chemically straighten their hair so that it can be straight. And I decided that I was no longer going to do that, that I'm going to just grow the hair that came out of my head, biology, just and be who I was naturally. And there was no issue. But, like we do sometimes believe that we have to change our appearance, change our look, change our dress, change our, history of our family, because many times in the Black community, we don't have the perfect family. You know what? We got cousin Little John who might have been acting up, right? But we have not been able to bring our whole selves to work. But I believe that organizations are making changes and are accepting of people and moving them into leadership, because that's how we're going to attract the talent. When they see people who look like them, speak like them, act like them, then they're more likely to say, that's the organization that I want to be at.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, top talent especially is demanding that now. They're demanding spaces to allow them to be who they are. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. There's so much to do. I mean, we have to dismantle a whole bunch of white supremacy culture first in all of our organizations before we get there, to be quite frank. But to your question, are we striving for that? Yeah. And I think for me, similar to Quita, there are small small to me, but in the grand scheme, I think actually move the needle. Small decisions that I make every day, especially in my role, to be as authentic and vulnerable as possible, to show the folks around me that look like me that like, no, it's okay. Like I say y'all all the time. I'm not going to say you all, I'm not proper all the time. And that's not just me. That's me not necessarily not making the decision not to code switch. It's just who I am. And if I'm passionate, the y'all is going to come out. Right. And it's something as small as that. But it kind of opens the door for people to be much more willing to be their authentic self. But I think what you're getting at, Brian, we do have to, in addition, actually start trying to structurally remove those barriers, both the seen and unseen kind of structural issues that make it worrisome for folks like us to be able to be ourselves, right? And those two things have to work in tandem.
Got it. And so how do you do that? So tell me, like, I'm coming to your organization. I'm just telling you that I'm coming with a PhD to any of your organizations. I'm not really hearing that. I'm not going to start talking the way I talk at home, at work, right? I just don't have faith. I mean, I care about my career and I want to be successful, and I'm smart enough to understand how things work. What are you doing to change that for me? Like, not generalities, like you all are in these positions. Yeah. What do you do to change that for me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I gave up being the Queen of England a long time ago. That is not who I am, right? And what the company is paying us to do is to do our job. And if I've got to be thinking, okay, did I raise my hand too much? Did I do this? Did I wear that? I'm using up brain space when I need to be focused on delivering my best work. And that's what I believe companies care about. Do your job, right? And less about, did you say this, that, and the third. The other thing that we're doing right now, we're fielding for some of our leaders, we're fielding interviews so that we can get some qualitative insights about what is it like to work at Genentech for a Black person, for Asian, for African American, and for a white person. So we actually understand within the organization, what is the experience like? Because we won't be able to have people feel like they belong if we don't really understand what are the different experiences that people are feeling. So we're building that information now with a third party, some one-on-one surveys, so that we can give that to our leadership, so that we can start to make some change. The other thing that we are doing that we've just rolled out to our very most senior leaders across our organization is each of them has to have a diversity and inclusion plan of action, right? Because it can't just be the chief diversity office and this team saying, we've got to do this. We need to know, what are all the leaders from the CEO on down? And I'm happy to say that my CEO and our executive council have been very supportive. And I believe that is one of the key things, because what happens is you might have the CEO support, but then there's the frozen middle, right? That's the people in the middle who like, D&I is political. I don't know why we're doing it, right? And so for us to really get under belonging, those are the people that we have to convince, and they have to, at some point, make a decision, is this the right place for them?
Got it. Hey, you said something about leadership, so I want to push, or not push, just ask a question about that. So a lot of the people here are MBA students who are leaders and aspire to go out and develop further leadership abilities and opportunities. What do leaders not understand about your work that you'd want them to know?
Well, go MBAs, because I'm an MBA too from Cornell. I think what people need to understand is that you have to demonstrate leadership and diversity and inclusion, right? And diversity and inclusion has to be budgeted. You budget what you value. So if you got a line item for marketing, you got a line item for sales, then you need to have a line item for diversity and inclusion, or people are not going to take you serious if you don't budget what you value. The other thing I think is you have to watch out for what I call friendly fire. And that is the people who go, oh my God, absolutely. I am the first one who supports diversity and inclusion. And the minute you leave the room, they say, you know what? That's not going to help us go faster. That's not going to help us do this. And so we have to really be taking people for what they actually do, not what they actually say.
So there's a couple things. So kind of going back to your previous question, sorry, Brian, I'm gonna take us back a little bit. The way that I think about this work, and it ties very, very well into any senior leaders that I work with. So first of all, as Quita said, it cannot just be our job as the heads of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just the CEO's job. It's not even just the leadership team's job. It is literally everybody, and not even just folks in management. It's everybody. So that's one thing that leadership has to understand. Totally +1 on the budget. You got to have resources for it. You also have to be in a space in which you understand that this is a journey, right? This is not you. If you could dismantle white supremacy or any of the isms in a year, I don't think we'd be in, I choose to believe we wouldn't be in the situation we are, right? We are trying to undo centuries of issues, right, with this work. So it takes time. So they have to understand that in terms of budget, it's not a 1-year budget. It's not a 1-year kind of time investment. It will take time. You will get it wrong more than you get it right. You'll get yourself back up and you'll get back on the horse, right? So knowing that it is a learning journey for everyone is really important. The last thing I would say is understanding, I can't tell you how many senior leaders I've spoken to, and particularly in interviews that have said, so tell me, like, what would your strategy be? And I tell them what my strategy would be for DEI at that organization. And their response is like, but what about the trainings? I just want to hear about the bias trainings. And I'm like, wait a minute. So understanding that there is programmatic change and systemic change, both are necessary, and to focus on the actual underlying systems. And by systems, I mean all of your people ops systems. So how you hire, how you fire, how you promote, how you rate people, all of your systems around how you develop your products or your services. So for us, like, we are thoroughly examining our grant making process to make sure, like, to figure out what are we missing? Who are we missing? Are we being equitable across the board with our grantees? So it's that level of thought and work, again, takes time. If you think you can solve the negative impacts of slavery with a 2-day bias training, you failed already. You just you're probably going to cause more harm than good if that is your strategy. So that's the type of stuff that senior leaders especially need to understand.
Got it. And so how has the recent surge in awareness of racial inequity, how's that affected you all? So obviously things have shifted dramatically, both COVID and then after the George Floyd killing, things have come really heated in the country, and I'm curious how that's affected the work that you all do.
I think that what I have told the team sometimes, we got to heal the healers, right? Because everybody is coming to us. And, we've instituted at Genentech what we call dialogue circles, and where we have a senior leader, we also have some mental health champions, and we allow employees to come and just have the conversation, because some people don't know what to say, right? But they want to be involved. They want to do something. And this is an opportunity. And many people have sent me so many messages, like they have never had a discussion about race at work until after this. Our CEO had not put out a statement before and really felt compelled to do so. And so I actually think, even though, like, COVID is a terrible pandemic, it has allowed us to sit still, to sit in that place where we can watch that video. We could see the other things that are happening, and we can't escape it. We can't go to the movies. We can't get on an airplane and travel to wherever. We can't go to the shopping mall. We are facing this head on. And I think that organizations have no choice. The organizations who want to be here for a long time, because if you put your head in the sand and be like, okay, well, we're not going to talk about it, everybody else is talking about it, and we know that you're not serious on diversity and inclusion. And I'm happy that we now have a conversation that is front and center within the organization that people are taking a part of. And for many people, it's the very first time that they are doing this. And I do think we have to allow some grace, right? Because it's clumsy. We haven't been discussing it. So we don't know how to discuss it with one another. And so we do need to allow people to have grace. But we also don't need to be asking all the Black and Hispanic people all the time, well, how you doing? Because that's exhausting as well. Like, do your own work and do your own research so you know what's going on.
So Quita is on my street knocking on my door with everything she just said. It's an awakening. I mean, there's been so many people over the past few years that are like, I'm woke, right? But this is different. And I've been saying, like, the problems aren't new, the tech is, right? So we've known that about police brutality for years. We've known about the damages, you know, seen and unseen, done to Black and brown bodies for centuries, right? None of it's new. It's just exactly what Quita said. It's the fact that we had to sit in our houses for most of this, right? And we were much more on our devices and things like that. We now have been awakened to some things that some of us have experienced our whole lives, right? So people have to come to terms with their bias. They have to come to terms with their privilege. They have to come to terms with the decisions and the actions they make, and the actually thinking about the impact that it has on other people. I mean, I think for me, we've seen a lot of organizations that have, you know, Twitter. When I saw, I think it was like Fruit by the Foot and like Jolly Rancher and all those types of companies come out like Black Lives Matter. I'm like, wait a minute, everybody, like, out the woodworks, everybody now, you know, Black Lives Matter. And it's still TBD how much of it is performative and how much is authentic, right? Time will tell. For me, the litmus test for me on whether or not an organization is serious about this, even if they just started, even if George Floyd was the impetus, that's fine. Okay, you're a little late to the party, but fine, we'll take it. The litmus test for me is, are you again looking at things from a systemic perspective? Like, are you changing things underneath the hood and not just, you know, saying, oh, I'm gonna, you know, hang a little air freshener, AKA do a training here, right? It's that kind of people, that kind of stuff. And then the last thing I'd say is I've been having a lot of conversations with folks about allyship. There's been tons of webinars and things like that about that. And when people ask, like, well, what can I do as an individual if I'm not a senior leader, if I'm not this? And my message to everybody is, get your people, collect your people. You one by one get them together, so it's not just on the backs of Black and brown people, right? It's on all of us to educate our own individual people about, like, what are the biases that we're seeing? What are the privileges? How can we actually do better? How can we improve?
I'm happy about the organization. Go ahead, Quita.
Yeah, I was gonna add, you know, we, no matter how well off we are, we walk out the door and we're Black. And I want to give you an example of what happened just a couple of weeks ago to my daughter when she was flying back from San Francisco to DC. She's a senior biology major at Howard, honor roll student. We were flying her back to get back onto campus. And when she landed at the airport in Dulles, she was gathering up her bags and the DEA came up on her and said, we believe you are carrying drugs. Like, this is like literally in July. Now she's flying, you know, we fancy Black people. She's flying in first class. We got Boston coach picking her up. So she's got a driver holding up Highsmith so she could get in. And the DEA, she's got her Howard hoodie on, surrounds her and says, we believe you are carrying drugs. Like, this is a 21-year-old biology honor student who then they proceed with no evidence. They didn't say there was no dogs. They just said, you look suspicious. That's what they told her. You look suspicious. They proceed to open up all her luggage on the grounds of the airport floor. So everybody is looking at her. And now she's considered criminal, right? She literally walked off an airplane and surrounded. They don't find anything, but she's crying. She's upset, right? This is what systemic racism looks like. You could just be getting off an airplane and be Black. and you have to be subjected to harassment for no reason. Now, because we, fancy Black people, I could get on the phone and call the senator and be like, you know what, Senator Harris, let me just tell you what happened to Quinlan. And then they could call the DEA. Now they have to apologize to her. But how many other students, how many other Black people don't get that apology? They just have to live with fear that every time they leave the door of their house, that they're going to be accused of a crime and they haven't done anything wrong but be born Black.
I hear you. I walk out the door Black every day. So I want to come back to the commitments that a lot of organizations are making. So as you both pointed out, a lot of organizations have seemed to become more aware of these issues recently. And I wonder if your organizations have made new commitments. Have your organizations, in response to what's been going on recently, made new commitments to racial equity? And if so, what does it look like?
I can start if you want, Quita. So we've been on our DEI kind of journey, DEI and racial justice journey, started back, honestly, in 2016, really spearheaded by a wonderful woman named Lauren Booker Allen. But we really didn't get started until about 2018. And so we've been on this journey fully for about 1.5 years. And again, we have a ton of work to do. But when George Floyd happened, we had talks, tons of talks, and not in a training kind of way. Like, it was just like, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. All Black people got together, and not in an effort to shame or blame, but just to share. Literally said, like, we each individually gave stories exactly like what Quita just said about her daughter. And so it started a deeper conversation than the ones that we were already having about, like, okay, let's skip all of the, like, theoretically speaking or intellectually, we can understand this problem, we can analyze it, we can break it down, we can change this. Like, let's talk at a human level of, like, how this impacts people that you know and that you work with. So that's changed. We've doubled down on all of our efforts, again, like really trying to revamp our grant making this year and next year. The other thing that we've done is with our pluralism work, which is really focused on trying to create a society in which diversity does not just exist, it's not just tolerated, but a world in which people can actually productively, empathetically, and respectfully engage across difference. So it's really, kind of quoting Danielle Allen, difference without domination is what we're going after. In response to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all of the endless names, we also added an additional about $750,000 into our originally scheduled pluralism funding, just to go towards the front lines of racial justice. So we are deploying that money and looking to create a much more robust racial justice strategy as a part of our pluralism work that I'm leading going into next year as well.
And so do you have I'm curious, your targets for your own organization? I'll ask Quita about this too. Did you say, like, all right, we're going to increase our representation of Black folks by this amount, Latinx by this amount? Or, I mean, were there concrete things that came out? Were there explicit targets that were set? And what did those look like?
Yeah, we have a full scorecard, and it cuts across all of our kind of core people ops kind of data of, like, not even who we hire, but starting at, like, offers and who, like, how many, like, of the different folks, especially underrepresented minorities, are actually making it through our interview process. We have that broken down kind of by different levels in the organization, especially for, like, director level and above, since that's an area where we have the most room for growth for sure. And then we've been creating a similar scorecard in terms of who, how and who we're investing in, right? Are we investing in underrepresented minority leaders? What do their boards look like, and all of that? So yeah, so we have started to create this scorecard, and it's something that we want to, as of course, much as we can share, we're planning to share that in a kind of annual diversity report, which I'll just say is quite different so we work, we're a social change venture where we work in the philanthropic field. very few funders are actually posting kind of the types of diversity reports that you're seeing in like tech or biotech or finance even. And so we are hoping to try and encourage our fellow funders to follow suit as well.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that at Genentech, we're absolutely looking at representation and actively having discussions about what that needs to be. We first started with our board of directors. It was 100% white men up until about 2 months ago. So, because the thing is, if you're going to talk about representation, let's start at the very top of the mountain and make sure that we have representation all the way throughout the organization. So we're absolutely looking at that. I think for us, because we are a biotech company, it's important to us that our research is reflective of the community. And so, certainly I was very concerned about COVID-19 amplifying the health disparities that communities of color that we've known for a long time, and lack of access to and participation in clinical research for historically underrepresented communities is a big thing. So a few years ago, myself and another lady at the company, we started an initiative called Advancing Inclusive Research. And I believed that work allowed us to, most recently, we launched a positive study called Impacta. And what that study did is it looked at hospitalized patients, but what is different about that study is that 85% of the people of that study are from communities of color, meaning they are Black, Hispanic. We went to Navajo Nation. We left the US and went to Kenya and Peru and Mexico and Brazil. And I don't know of any other COVID study that has 85% of the population that is a person of color, so that we can understand how this disease is impacting us, and we need to build trust in the community. And I believe it's important foundationally that we have diversity and inclusion embedded in the business.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of these, because you all didn't tell me exactly what your targets were, but I'm gonna let that pass. But in terms of your explicit targets, I mean, generally when people start saying, all right, we want to increase, I'm going to focus on representation for a second. And leadership may be one thing, but as you start to go down, it's common that there's pushback, right? That not everyone is on board. And I assume that still must be true now. So I'm curious, have you all gotten pushback on some of your efforts? And if so, what does that look like and how have you responded to it?
I mean, I think,
go ahead, Quita. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, you go.
I wouldn't quite call it pushback. I would call it polite inquiry from folks.
I thought you felt like you didn't need the code switch. Simone.
No, because it's not quite pushback. Honestly, it's like actual genuine questions. And I say that with full honesty, because I think there have been certain folks that I've spoken with that like just don't know, like they're genuinely trying to understand the why, which is different than like, I get it, but no. So yeah, I mean, and I think it actually gets exactly to what Quita was saying about that kind of like the frozen middle. I'm gonna steal that because I love that. But when you're thinking about whether it's bringing folks in or kind of trying to make sure that they are in a space in which they want to stay and that they're thriving, your middle managers are your like front line, right, for this work, right, both on the hiring and the retention piece. And so we have over the past year been developing some trainings for them, and it's much more of like awareness and deeper coaching for our managers to understand, first of all, even understanding like what these targets and things like that mean for them, right? Like sometimes we get questions where they're just like, so does that mean I can't hire a white person? And I'm like, no. That is not at all, you know what I mean? Like people just not quite understanding what this means. And so yes, there has been like some just questions and kind of discomfort with like what it all means. But I think through these conversations that we're having, we're starting to move the needle in terms of an understanding and an actual deliberate practice from our managers to do this.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. There are some people who are like, we should just, I think you mentioned this earlier, Brian, we should just hire the most qualified candidate. Well, are you saying that if you hire somebody Black or Hispanic, they now are no longer qualified? Right? Like, we need to watch the language that we use, because that irritates me to no end. Like, you're not even going to get a chance to get interviewed unless you qualified. So I do think there are some in the organization who have not quite bought in. And I think Simone mentioned that, you know, unless you went to this school, then you're not good enough, right? And so there's over 5,000 colleges and universities in the US. So we shouldn't just be picking people from 3 schools, right? So we need to broaden what good looks like, or otherwise we're going to continue to live in the echo chamber that if you act alike, think alike, walk alike, even talk alike, then that's who we should be choosing. That's not diversity, and that's not how you cultivate the best minds. So I do think that we have to constantly reinforce what does good look like, and be intentional in our hiring practices so that we can bring the best talent to the organization.
Yeah, so I hear you pushing back against what is people talk about the pipeline argument, right? Like there's not enough people out there that are qualified, so you're pushing back against that. I hear that. Let me push back a little bit on that. So we also know there's clear research on this and evidence that the disparities that we're talking about at the level of the organizations you all work exist at all levels of society. So if you have a little Black girl who has the same amount of talent as a little white girl, that the possibility that she's going to get the same access to educational resources and others where she can thrive, and by the time you all look at those 2 women, they might not look the same, right? But that is just the nature of the society in which we live right now. And so as you think about that, so I accept the pipeline argument you're making against that, but there is still this inequity all through the system. How far down is your responsibility? So the reality is, if you believe what I just said, there are people who you aren't getting to see, not because they didn't have the talent, but because they didn't have the opportunity, right? And you can hire them now because previously they didn't get the chance to get to the place where they would be a reasonable hire for you. What's your responsibility there? Is there any responsibility there? Is it just to find the best people at this stage, or do you feel responsibility to go deeper down in the societal pipeline?
We do, and we believe it's going to require some bold action, right? And so we have an initiative that we've started called Kindergarten to Careers, where it's a enterprise level kind of blueprint, because what we were finding was that one department was over here working with HBCUs, another department was working with PhD candidates and some other things. So what we want to do is really have a comprehensive engagement plan that allows us to think about the pipeline, especially for us, because we want people that can go into medicine and life sciences. So we're starting, like I said, at kindergarten. So we're starting very early, going into secondary, going into postdoc, and then early in career. So we're putting a lot of emphasis within the business, and then within our charitable funding around how do we implement something like this, because we know there are a lot of systemic barriers, that people don't have the same access, that don't have the same funding. I mean, some of our PhDs have to have so many papers that they have, and that they are the first author on. And so we're taking a look at how do we ensure that we're helping these PhDs or fellows get the right steps, criteria, so that they can come to a Genentech and be productive. So this is a 10-year ambition that we're looking at on our Kindergarten to Careers effort.
Let me stay with you for a second, Quita. I'm going to get back to you in a second, Simone. So There's recently been a lot of discussion about Milton Friedman, right? The role of the organization is simply
Yeah.
to maximize shareholder value, and you're pushing against that, and I hear that. So I'm going to ask you.
I agree. It should be maximizing shareholder value. At the end of the day, we all need to have a job.
Okay, all right. But some of the stuff you're doing now, I'm going to ask this question. You all lobby. You're a big organization. You have to have lobbying efforts. And
Yes.
my guess is most of that lobbying is about things that have to do directly with biotech. So here's a question. If you all are really committed to these issues of social justice, are you out there lobbying government on behalf of those issues? And if so, what things have you lobbied for that are not directly relevant to biotech?
Well, the one thing that I just sent an email out to the officers today is California Prop 16 and Genentech's strong support of that. Not only are we supporting that with our words, but we're supporting that with our dollars, because we do believe that race can be a factor in college selection, because we know that for us in California, a lot of our workforce is going to potentially come from the California school system. So we're absolutely supporting other opportunities that we see that will make a difference, a fundamental difference in who the workforce is.
Okay, all right. And now I'm gonna turn back to Simone and say,
I'm scared after that question.
so there's also been lately some questions about the role of philanthropy, right? Like, so maybe that's just the cover for people who have a lot of money to maintain control of how the society functions, right? So what we really need is the government, the people, to make these decisions, right? So you're working basically for a philanthropic organization. What's the role of philanthropy in dealing with these big societal issues? And shouldn't that really be the role of government?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. Because there are definitely some folks that believe the opposite. They're like, it should be on philanthropy, or at least like, pretty like the multi-billionaires to do more. So there's arguments for sure on both sides. I think I'll talk about us first and then kind of go to philanthropy. We are in a very unique space in which our role is, I'm seeing that is there still feedback, or you're good? Good? Okay, good. So our role really as a philanthropic organization is to take wealth, right, that we've been given and distribute it back into society, right? We do that through our grant making, right? So we do see it as a huge piece of our work to do just that. And so the work that we're focusing on, especially around reimagining capitalism, is really based in this understanding that we cannot reimagine capitalism and not also center race as a part of that strategy, right? To reimagine a system that is actually doing exactly what it was designed to do, we are having to really rethink our point of view as a philanthropic organization, right? Is that better? Can y'all hear me better? Okay, I'm not sure. Sorry about the mic. We really are having to think about how we do that. How do we actually make that work? So as a part of our reimagining capitalism work, for example, a lot of what we're focusing on is explicitly trying to, through our funding, through the advocacy that we do, actually trying to build an anti-racist and inclusive economy. That is actually core to who we are and core to what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do something similar with tech. We are trying to create and incentivize much more ethical behavior and equipping tech workers with the tools to actually do that in terms of how they build their products. And pluralism is all about, for us at the moment, racial justice. So we really have taken racial equity and racial justice as core to us as it relates to both what we do internally, but also in terms of how we think of our grant making. And then in terms of philanthropy, I think one of the big things that we all as funders are trying to figure out is how do we do this in a way that really understands the power dynamics at play, both the power from which the money that we are using comes, right? But also the power that comes in the relationship between grantee and funder, right? And so we at ON have been doing quite a bit of work around decolonizing wealth. It's kind of a practice in a book and, you know, a strategy popularized by Edgar Villanueva. So highly recommend that for anyone that's interested in that. That really thinks about the power dynamics, both internal and as it relates to our external grant making as a funder.
Great. So we have just a few more minutes left. I'm going to give you each a minute just to wrap up any brief closing statements you might have. So Quita, you want to go ahead?
You know, we have to stop tiptoeing around race and in our industry, health inequity. So I appreciate, Brian, that you've given us this platform to have the discussion. Many people say, well, what can I do? How can I help? Well, I think I agree with you. Versus a change agent is somebody who is willing to put their capital on the line and confront issues and make systemic change. And I'm asking the students and the people listening on this call, it's time to be a change maker. Step up from ally and be a change maker.
Great, thanks. Simone?
I love that. You know, I think ally is another kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion where that gets overused to the point where nobody knows what it means anymore. So I love that you talk about it as kind of a change maker. I think I have two messages. So I know that there's a lot of folks on this call likely that are interested in the actual work of doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. I applaud you. Get ready for the ride of your life. It will be some of the most exhausting and also, again, the most invigorating work that you'll do. And it's so necessary, right? Like we are in this world, not just in the US, really at a place in which we are really, really trying to fight for kind of the soul of humanity, right? And it really, really does start with each of us individually, taking the time to actually confront our own issues, privilege, bias. We all have it. Even as a Black woman, I have bias, right? So being okay with that and being willing to do that work personally to become more aware so that unconscious becomes conscious, so that you are then able to, whether it's with your friend groups, at Thanksgiving this year, whatever, you know, you feel much more comfortable and confident to be able to say, hey, I actually believe this, and let's have a conversation about that. And let me help you understand like why this is actually not correct, why this narrative is false. And I think if we are starting to have those conversations on a one-to-one basis, and we can do that at scale, it will make me and Quita's work much easier, much smoother if we can do that. So, but again, I thank y'all so much for joining and being such active listeners. And thanks, Brian, for the platform.
Well, thank you both for showing up. It was great to talk to you both. I appreciate the candor and forthrightness. It's often hard to have that around issues of race. And thank you both for the work you're doing on these issues. I really appreciate it. So next week, I'll talk about structural racism with Professor Charlton McEwen. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Black Software, the Internet and Racial Justice, and is a professor of media, culture, and communications at NYU. And if you like this program, feel free to share it with your friends and family. It's open to all. Thanks everyone for joining.